Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to a very special edition of the Seaman Cinema Sit-Down. That's right, folks. We are back once again, chilling in the comic book corner as we continue the Seaman's Infinity War countdown, ripping through all 18 preceding Marvel films in the 18 days before Avengers Infinity War hits here. In the States and everywhere. It's all coming out on the same day. No spoilers. We're going to be leaking this time around for anybody. Because we all get to see it on the same day. So, with that being said, we continue on with the 8th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it is actually the 8th film. We have jumbled a bunch of things up in the Phase 1, but Phase 2 and forward, everything is pretty much chronological by release date, except for Guardians 2. We are not there yet. So you know the drill. Pull up a chair, take a seat. Today, I am talking about Thor The Dark World. I'm trying to get myself jacked up to talk about this one because this movie doesn't really jack you up too much. Unfortunately, in the Marvel pantheon of films, and unfortunately for Thor, but maybe not unfortunately, maybe it was this movie that eventually led us to Thor Ragnarok, which was a gem. This one just kind of falls flat. Unfortunately, the director this time around, Alan Taylor, did not build off of certain things that I wish he would have. He does build off some things and change some things that work a little bit better this time around, but the big thing that, was built into the foundation of Thor was that light, charismatic charm and humor that he has. It was really kind of brought out more in Avengers. We got to see Thor having some fun toward the backstretch of that. But even in his first movie, although it's not a focal point the way it is in like Ragnarok, or even either of the Avengers movies that he appears in, Brandon did lay some foundation of, Thor is just naturally kind of charming and funny. And kind of like the foundation that the Avengers built on. And then Avengers 2 built on that. And then Ragnarok built on everything. Unfortunately, Mr. Alan Taylor did not build off that part of the character. He built off of the brooding, no fun Thor. And that's what this movie is, man. This movie is not a lot of fun. It's unfortunate. And it comes up really short. The upside is there's at least a little something, and almost all of the Marvel movies are entertaining. Whoa, just caused an earthquake hitting my desk. All of the movies are entertaining to a degree, but this one really comes up the shortest for me. At least up until this point. Maybe as we continue to watch, I remember something that I forgot, but I think everything after this just kind of starts going back up the hill, and this kind of is my valley. That being said, it's like, well, what's bad besides, not building on Thor's humor? Well, Thor, at least in the original Thor is having a ton of fun. Thor don't seem to be having too much fun in this movie. He's got to be dealing with the fact that Loki and Avengers messed everybody up, so now he's trying to fix the 9 realms and bring peace and restore order. So he's out, not having fun battles, he's just having battles he's got to get through. So he's got that going on. Halfway through the movie, the antagonist kills his mom. That's always tough, kind of weigh on you. And there's just nowhere for Thor to kind of get out and enjoy himself too much in this one. He's got a lot of big things on the plate, and that's disappointing because Thor is a ton of fun to hang around. In the movies, you always are having fun with Thor, except here. And I think a lot of that has to deal with our villains who have kind of an interesting background, right? We get this cool story at the beginning, and I love the way that it opens with Odin telling this historical story about the Dark Elves and how the Dark Elves basically ran the entire universe. Everything was in darkness. The Asgardians showed up and laid waste to all the Dark Elves. They were dealing with something called the Ether, which would allow them to permeate darkness everywhere. And they kill most of them. The leader, Malekith, and a small cohort of his guys abandon the fight, get back into their ship, put themselves into stasis. And all of this is centered around the Convergence, which is the 9 realms lining up in perfect order. And they put themselves in stasis, and when the Ether and the Convergence come back around, hundreds and thousands of years later, they'll be woken up, which is what happens. the Asgardians take the ether and they, instead of destroying it, they go and they put it somewhere dark and in the depths of the world where no one will find it, until Jane Foster just randomly stumbles on it and it pulls into her, and then we don't really learn or find out anything. It's kind of weird. Like, Jane's just there a lot, right? Like, Jane had so much to do in the first Thor, and she's having so much fun doing it. And then this one, it's like she's just, hey, I'm here. She gets some fun science stuff at the beginning, but once Thor brings her to Asgard, even Jane doesn't get to have any fun, and she's just got this thing in her that's slowly killing her. And turning her dark. But, like, there's no explanation, or they don't dive into any of that. And, again, just more of our characters who, Thor and Jane, man, there was so much positivity coming out of the first Thor, right? With that innocent, flirty, kind of high school relationship vibe that they had going on. None of that in this one, man. Everybody's miserable. And it's unfortunate, because Jane, I love Jane's character, and she's not really much other than just, she's a prop kind of in this movie, and that's unfortunate because Natalie Portman is brilliant. I mean, the little bit they give her at the beginning, Natalie Portman owns it. We'll talk about that. But yeah, then she just kind of becomes a prop, and it just falls flat. And then Malekith, on top of all that, is just the most generic of all the villains we've gotten, right? The general issue with Marvel is that their villains aren't very good outside of Loki. And as I rewatched Phase 1, kind of found that wasn't totally true. Abomination, to a degree, right? We've had a lot of these, double bad guys, right? You had Blonsky for a while, and then it became Abomination. Abomination kind of generic, but hey, he did what he needed to do to create cool action. Iron Man, you had, Raza the whole movie, and then it turns out that's Obadiah, and then Obadiah is just kind of a generic guy. Even in the original Thor, you had the Destroyer that's kind of generic, but all of them, to some degree, had something positive from all of the villains, at least in Phase 1 and even Iron Man 3. No positives, man, with Malekith. Very monotone, just shows up. He's the most generic, man. I mean, it's literally, my motivation is not I want revenge on Asgard for killing all my people. We're going to take out Asgard and then we'll take over the world. No, it's, I wanted to take over the world once. That didn't work out. I went to sleep for a really long time. Now I'm back to take over the world. That's it. Even the other elves, they all wear the same mask outside of, oh boy, I don't even know if I want to say this name out loud. Adewale Akinoye Agbaje, who plays Algrim. I'm sorry for butchering your name, dude. But Adewale, that's where we're going to stop because I can say that. He plays Algrim, and, he's at least different. Apparently there are black elves in the universe. But everybody else wears a mask, so it's just him and Malekith that are kind of facially exposed. And they have the same hairdo, though, even though their faces are different. Just very generic villains across the board. And like I said, there's a rich history and kind of some fun places I think you could have taken the Dark Elves, and instead, the Dark Elves just brought darkness to Thor. That's what happens. It's dark, it's gloomy, that's most of it. Look, I could probably talk for a long time, and we're already up to almost 9 minutes on this bad boy. With the bad, they didn't capitalize on very many of the things. We get a couple sequences. Fortunately, one of them, toward the back half, leading into the finale, a ton of fun, and of course, it deals with Loki and Thor. Loki and Thor are the best thing in this movie, man. And what's cool is they get to team up for a little bit. But it takes a real long time to get there. And when we do, we get a fun kind of team up with Loki and Thor, and then more generic drama. I'm going to stop talking about the bad, because I could go on and on about just how bland most of this movie is. But there are good things. There are good things in all of our Marvel films. And believe it or not, I took notes, and I wrote down a bunch of them. So I'm going to kind of skim through this. Don't mind me if I'm looking more than normal. I didn't really organize these yet. But we're going to kind of just come through, and I'm going to note some of the things that I did like. First, we get our first three-dimensional title card for Marvel, building off of the original, kind of just like the comics flashing now. We're kind of moving the camera around the actual word Marvel. Cool. And look, we've seen the iterations of the title card change, so this is the first major change marked in Dark World. So that's one thing. There you go, right? It's not nothing. No, I swear it gets better. But Loki's trial, right? That's where we start. Loki's being brought in front of Odin, which is kind of strange, right? Like, he gets taken out of Avengers, and that's the one thing, we don't kind of know how long has passed. We know enough time has passed that Tony's made 42 versions of Iron Man suits, and that Thor's been out trying to restore order to the 9 realms. So a lot's been going on, but we open up with Loki's trial, which you'd think would happen before Thor went out trying to save, reorder, bring order back to the 9 realms. But this scene's great because we get some Anthony Hopkins being awesome Odin. And Loki being awesome Loki. I mean, he's very defiant. He challenges him, and he's like, you're trying to do is find a throne, which we have noted that's Loki's main objective. He wants a throne so he can rule people, and he says it's my birthright, right? It was his birthright when he was an Asgardian. And then when he found out that he was Laufey's son of the Frost Giants, again, birthright was still to be king, to rule something. And this, like the way he says silence and tells, Thor that he's not king, he never comes down super, super hard on Loki. Well, now Loki tried to take over, Midgard, which is Earth, and Hopkins ain't about that. And when he says it's his birthright, Hopkins cuts him off and just sticks it to him the way he stuck it to Thor in the first one. I love it. It's so good. He just looks at him and goes, your birthright was to die. Which is true. If Anthony Hopkins doesn't save Loki, Loki dies and he has nothing. But that doesn't stick for Loki. He's caught up in the once he figured out that he was an Asgardian, that's been in his way all the way. But it's a great sequence. Hopkins just kind of sticks it to him. Boom, they banish Loki down to the cell. And what's cool is you finally get to kind of at least understand his family dynamic more, where never really tight with Odin, but both him and Thor love Frigga, who's played by Renee Russo. She was in the original Thor, just not very much to do, so we didn't mention her. But gets a lot to do here for a little bit. And one of the first things she does, she goes and visits Loki. She's kind of the person who's brought the magic. Kind of taught Loki magic and stuff. So she projects herself down into the cell so she can talk to Loki. And it's a great scene to follow the Odin scene, because you get Loki, he lets his guard down a little bit, right? And he has this real honest conversation with his mother, and she's like, look, you put yourself here. Like, none of us wanted to put you here. What you did crossed the line. She's like, you disappointed your father, and goes, he's not my father. And he does that Loki switch where he's kind of like one place, and then boom, that thing that sets him off triggers him and he amps up to kind of crazy land. And then Frigga hits him with a line, man, and Hiddleston handles this brilliantly. She goes, well, then what is that? Then what is that? Am I not your mother? And he drops, comes all the way down and just pauses. Because he knows what he has to say, but he doesn't truly believe it, right? Like, he'll constantly use, you're not my dad, to Odin. But Frigga's his mom, and this is true for any guy. The relationship, a guy has with his mom, it can be a lot stronger than most relationships. And that's very true here for Loki, you can tell. But he has to say it, so he drops, he pauses, and then he goes, you're not. But you can tell how much it hurts him, and that's huge, because that plays later on in the film. That stuff is great. Then we get to jump in to a little bit of fun and action, where we get to see what Thor and the Warriors 3 and Sif are up to. And we start right there with the Warriors 3 and Sif. And they're in this battle trying to clean up Hogun's homeworld. Kind of restore order there, and you get this cool kind of battle scene, and they start running into problems, and Heimdall sends Thor. Thor shows up, looks glorious, man. The long hair is back, longer than Thor 1, right on pace with what we got in Avengers. No more hair dye in his beard or his eyebrows, and Thor comes in doing some Thor stuff. Awesome, get to see Mjolnir. We have a little bit of fun, but a very, very short amount of fun. We don't live too long in that battle. And then this big rock creature comes out, which kind of reminded me of Taika Waititi's character in Ragnarok. And it's like, oh man, this is going to be huge. And Thor just hits him with Mjolnir, shatters him into a billion pieces. Everything's over, order's restored. And on we move. And it's like, man, we were having fun. Why did it end so quick, Alan Taylor? Come on. But you figure, all right, maybe we'll get to go further. What's cool is we come back from that, and we come back to Asgard. And this is one thing Alan Taylor did well. He took the shine off of Asgard, right? We still have this beautiful landscape as we kind of, with the camera, fly into Asgard. And the city looks wonderful. But the shine has kind of been taken down, and it's more practical. We get to go to a bunch of different places in Asgard. And we get to see more building structure. And not everything is shiny. A lot of stuff is brick and mortar and stone. So that's cool. I really like that. And we're here. They're at one of their celebratory dinners, and this is kind of it's a really cool section of the movie for me, because we get Odin talking one-on-one with Sif. Now, in the original Thor, I didn't mention it, but you can kind of see this longing in Sif's eyes. She definitely has a thing for Thor. They've been fighting side by side for years. And probably just had this feel like Thor eventually, one day when we're not battling and he's gonna be king and us settle down, boom, this'll work. I'm just gonna bite my tongue and hold tight. But throughout Thor, when she's on, you get these kind of longing looks and then looks of jealousy once Jane Foster shows up. And she has this awesome conversation with Odin, where Odin's basically like, look, man, the Bifrost got broken. He's not going back down to Earth. You've got to be the person for Thor. And all of a sudden you start to get the dynamic, right, of things that bother Odin. Odin, not a fan of Jane Foster, wants him with Sif. And then Sif and Thor kind of finally have an actual conversation. And it's this sweet combo, but again, you can tell, the longing in this is there for her. And Thor is just miserable because he can't get back to Jane yet. And Thor is miserable a lot in this movie. But they have this conversation. And, it just, you feel so bad for Sif, because she's like, we all noticed that you cut out of here early. Because he leaves, usually you celebrate all night long, and Thor will cut out early, go talk to Heimdall to find out what's going on with Jane. Downer Thor, still hanging out. But you really feel for Sif, and it's the first time in the movies you've really felt for Sif in some way. And it was cool to kind of get a little bit more with her this time around. Then we get to jump back down to Earth, and we finally get to see what Jane's up to. And this is the very short stretch where Jane gets to have fun. She's on a date, and the whole beginning of the date, she's got her menu up like this, and she's peeking over. She doesn't really want to be on a date. She's hung up on Thor, but he's never come back. It's been years, right? It's been 2 years since she's seen him, so she's trying to move on. And then Darcy shows up really abruptly as they're having this really awkward first date convo. It's yada, 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 this is cool, okay, hey, nice to meet you. But we got all this stuff going on, and we get to see Jane jump into that science zone that she loves, and they go, and what's happening is the convergence is causing the world to be out of whack, and they find this abandoned warehouse in London. I think we're in England somewhere, and a little kid can make a giant truck float. They throw things down it's kind of like the square building, so you can look straight down all the way at the bottom. You throw things and they disappear, and then they come back up from top and come down, and it's oh my gosh, the fabric of reality is starting to tear and open up these portals. All that's fascinating. Love Jane through that whole sequence. Thor finally shows up, and you get this cool bit where, actually before that, Jane kind of hears something and goes investigates and ends up disappearing for 5+ hours. She gets sucked to where the ether is. How ironic. What are the chances one random portal shows up and it takes you to the one thing that will wake up the Dark Elves and start us on the misery that is Dark World. So yeah, and then from that point on, Jane is not much fun to be around. She does have some really sweet moments after she gets the ether in her. When she comes back, rain won't fall on her, so that's kind of cute. And then Thor does show up, and she slaps him once, and it's just sorry, I've been out of it, but then slaps him again. It's where have you been for 2 years? And then he ends up realizing that something's wrong with her when there's some trouble, somebody touches her, causes the police and other people that show up to kind of all go, whoa, and Thor's all right, you're coming with me, takes her up to Asgard, try to figure out what's going on. We all know that's the ether. She has some nice scenes with Frigga, which was nice, because Odin kind of just, we don't want anything to do with you. Frigga understands that this is the person Thor loves. It is more accepting of Jane. But certainly a really tough go-around for your first family meeting, right? I could be the end of the world with what's inside me if you guys can't help me. And, Dad doesn't like me at all, and I can't believe you told your dad about me. And, but the stuff with Rene Russo and Natalie Portman is really nice. And even Sif and Natalie Portman have some interactions that aren't terrible. And it's interesting because, that dynamic, and obviously Jane doesn't know that Sif is into Thor. But, I like that stuff. From there, like, it's hit or miss from every point forward there. The Dark Elves start doing stuff. They do have some cool stuff. Their technology on their ship is really cool to look at. Visually is kind of fun. They have these like gravity grenades where they throw and it basically just sucks everybody up. And then, like I said, they have this thing that Adewale's Algrim uses to become accursed. And those are kind of like steroided up like super soldiers. And they bust in and break out everybody but Loki. And then Thor and co, they all come into they all come in and wipe everything down. And what's cool is, heartbreaking too, is obviously Malekith is trying to track down Jane, who has the ether inside her, and that leads him to a room that has both her and Rene Russo in it. And you kind of get this, how we want to put it, you get like this interaction that eventually leads to Malekith killing Frigga. And Frigga gets to do some badass stuff, man, first. So she is awesome with her knives and daggers. Love that. And then unfortunately dies. And that gets broken to Loki, and it creates one of the cool moments in the movie where you see Loki find out about it and he's angry, but he doesn't want to show anybody. And as soon as nobody's looking, he just kind of goes like this, and everything in the room just kind of gets thrown against the walls. And then Thor eventually comes down to talk to him, because the only way they're going to stop it is if we get a Thor-Loki team-up. Brothers side by side getting vengeance for their mom, and that's the best part of the whole movie. And it starts again on a downer, but it's cool to see this happen to Loki because he's been so buttoned up right through 2 movies as the bad guy. Now this one he's not going to be the bad guy, so we break him down, and Thor is like, come on Loki, no more illusions. And Loki kind of lets the room go to what it really looks like. And his hair is all out. He's got nothing on his feet. He's broken glass. He's stepped on his feet or bleeding. He's a complete mess. The room's a mess. And he's like, now you can see me. And Thor's like, look, man, I'm hurt too, right? Like, I'm more I can be more miserable than you, Loki, and I will try this whole movie. But we do get this cool sequence of them kind of bonding over, this vengeance. And there's even a point in the movie where it's like, God, man, like, I just wish I could trust you, Loki. And Loki says, trust my hatred. Trust my anger. Trust my vengeance. I'm gonna, and it's just this line. You're just like, oh, yeah, I like rooting for Loki. It's the best thing in this movie. And we get this awesome sequence where Thor and Loki get to come up with a Loki deception. And Thor outsmarts him first, right? They hop into... he breaks out Loki. They hop into one of the dark elf spaceship kind of airship machines, and they're awesome, man. They're so cool. They're these thin blades that can go this way and upright and sideways. And Thor and Loki try to drive one as they're trying to get out of Asgard to a portal, hopefully, that Loki knows about to travel. That's not the Bifrost. And we get to see, they have this moment where like Thor is struggling. He keeps taking things out. And he's just like, I think you missed a column. Loki's like, Thor's like, shut up, Loki. And they're still struggling. Loki's like, are you sure you don't want me to drive? He's like, of the 2 of us, who can actually fly? Stuff like that was really good. And like I said, this whole stretch of the movie is probably the best part. But the thing that I love the most is that all of a sudden, like, they're coming, and the one door is open, and Thor throws, like, Loki says something, and Thor just throws him out the window, and you're like, holy jeez, he just threw him out. But he lands on a ship being driven by Fandral, who is now Zachary Levi, the third person in the universe that I've noticed. Bruce Banner, Norton to Mark Ruffalo, and James Rhodes, Terrence Howard to Don Cheadle. Now, Fandral has become Zachary Levi. He's driving the boat. Not a great ad. The original Fandral, so cool looking. They tried to recreate that with Zachary Levi, and again, kind of that, like, you're not supposed to look that way, kind of like the Thor bleaching. Not great, but he lands in this boat, and then Thor eventually joins. So it's like, oh, he outsmarted him. He's like, oh, very good, Thor. they end up flying through a wall that is a portal that takes them to the Dark World. They have Jane with them, knowing that this will draw all of the elves to the Dark World and away from Asgard. That's Thor's big plan. And we get this awesome sequence on there where him and Loki start fighting with each other. And Thor like goes to grab his hammer and like come hit Loki, and Loki cuts his hand off. Hand goes rolling away. Thor is on the ground writhing in pain, and boom, the Dark Elves show up. And Loki, being typical Loki, is like, hey, look, I'll make a trade for you, man. You take the ether, but like, you know, you got to get me out of here. And they're like, okay. And the whole concept is now, you know, the Dark Elf lifts up Jane and starts extracting the ether out of her. As soon as that happens, you hear Thor go, Loki now! And Loki wipes away the illusion, and Thor has the hammer, shoots the lightning, and blows the ether up. The problem is that the ether turns to glass, and Malekith can still kind of get it up and control it, and then he bounces. And in doing so, before bouncing, he stabs Loki through the heart, and Loki dies. And it is emotionally heart-wrenching, man. I mean, you really sit there and you can see, like, even though Thor's conflicted, he knows Loki is a bad guy. He's heartbroken, man. You know, like, even in Avengers, he says it in Avengers, like, you know, everyone's like, yeah, Loki's a bad guy. He's like, yeah, but he's my brother. Like, at the end of the day, he's still my brother. And they're like, he killed 80 people. He's like, well, he's my stepbrother. But again, you get this kind of family bond connection between the two of them that when Loki dies, you feel everything Thor feels, and it just kind of sparks him to go chase down Malekith, and we get a kind of cool action sequence that follows where Natalie Portman is using this technology that Eric Selvig came up with to try to control with magnets and stuff the portals, and she can kind of make them appear anywhere. So for a while, Malekith and Thor are just falling in and out of different places. The big beast from the Jotunheim, we get to see them crash there, and he gets sucked into Earth, which the post-credits scene, we get to see him running around, still chasing birds and stuff, which is kind of funny. You know, a little bit of light humor in there. And that sequence is kind of cool, because you send Thor, you get to put Thor on the tube. He's like, how far away from Greenwich are we? Oh, it's 2 stops on this train. And he hops on the train and takes the tube next to people. But, I mean, at the end of it, it's kind of this big generic thing. And, you know, I mean, they do some stuff where Natalie Portman uses the portals to take off, like, a hand and then an arm of Malekith, and then Thor hits him with the hammer, drives him, they hit one more portal, he lands on the Dark World again, and then they stop the ether, they get the ether back into a smaller version of the thing that it was in from the beginning, and then as the ship is falling down, Natalie Portman's Jane does one more thing and makes the ship transport to the Dark World. It falls on Malekith, and thank God he's gone, hopefully forever. But the master of trickery, Loki, still always ends up with the upper hand, and we cut back to the Dark World where Loki's body was, and we see a green thing moving on the side. It's just kind of a glow green on the side of the screen, and then we see a staff, and we see an Asgardian soldier. And we know that that green movement was Loki. And Loki clearly waited till someone showed up, killed that guy, took his form, hopped on the boat, went back, and tricks Odin. We don't see it happen full on, but we know what's going on. You know, Loki's there as this guy, like, whatever, and he's like, yeah, okay. And what we all know is by the time we finally do get back to Ragnarok and back to Thor's world, Odin is Loki. Loki is, you know, unfortunately all this stuff happens off screen, but we know that Loki's made the switch, and by the end of the movie, Thor has this conversation with Odin where Odin is actually reassuring and says some really nice things to Thor, and it's touching because we know it's Loki. And then we do get to see it be Loki at the end. And the one other thing I love is all the other people that pretend to be Loki in the movie, right? Hopkins does a great job as being Loki Odin. He just matches the facial smiles and things that Loki does. And there's a sequence after Thor takes him out of the prison where Loki's doing illusion stuff where he turns himself... who does he do first? Like, he turns like Thor into Sif, then he turns himself into Captain America, and oh man, Chris Evans just knocks it out. It's the most fun I think Chris Evans probably has ever had as Cap, because he's playing Loki. It works so well, and it's just one of those things you love about him, and the trickery, and always with the upper hand. That's why he's the best. I can't wait to see everything play out in Infinity War, because again, we get even more Loki in Thor 3 with Ragnarok. we got to just wait a long time to get there, but when we do, more fun for them. So always glad that Loki can make it seem like he dies. I think at this point we're up to 2 fake deaths for Loki. And that's it. Like I said, the interactions, Heimdall, I love that Idris Elba has a ton more to do in this. His interactions with Thor are a lot better, and there's more of them. I like that stuff. Like I said, after Rene Russo's death, they do this beautiful Viking send-off where she's in the boat and all the other people have died are in boats behind them, and they shoot the flaming arrows and they kind of float off the edge of the world of Asgard and then turn into almost like their spirits turn into this glowing dust and go up to the sky. It's beautiful. And they have all these kind of almost like Japanese flame thing where you put the flame in, it floats up. It's just all these little glowing balls that do that. So there are some really beautiful things. Like I said, the look of Asgard is kind of cooler, and we get to see some different areas. So Alan Taylor doesn't do a terrible job. It's just a lot of this movie, outside of the visual stuff, action sequences are okay and it's bland, but there's still some fun to be had. There's, and there's good things that hit right? Like Frigga's death hits you. Loki's fake death hits you until you realize that it's a fake death. At one point we think Jane is in real trouble, and anyway, I'm talking in circles probably now, and this movie will do it. But there is some good stuff throughout. We do get, and like I said, that scene, it's all worth it for that scene on the Dark World, because Loki and Thor's interactions are fantastic. All right, I think I've milked this for everything I could get out of it, despite it not being one of my favorites. Almost forgot. At the end of the movie, the ether's got to go somewhere, and this is the first time we hear the words Infinity Stones. The Warriors 3 and Sif, I think it might just be Volstagg and Sif, take the ether and the little thing that's being held to the Collector. We get to see Benicio del Toro for the first time open up that door to the world of the Guardians, if you will. And Benicio looks fantastic. They take the ether and he's like, we want to give you this. And he's like, we have the Tesseract, but we can't have 2 Infinity Stones that close to each other. Now we know Infinity Stones. I mean, we already knew Thanos, but now we know, boom, 2 exact Infinity Stones. Boom, right there. So the Collector has the ether, and the Tesseract is safely in Asgard. So that was that was probably one of the bigger moments of the movie. Happens right at the end, boom. Post credits, we just get, like I said, we see the creature from Jotunheim, and Thor comes back to give Jane a kiss. One of the weakest mid-credit scenes in the world, so even that kind of falls flat. So yeah, a really okay movie. The Loki Thor stuff is great. Early Jane, awesome. Glad Frigga got some stuff, but really bad villain. Very little fun for Thor. But there it is, man. That's all I got to say. I don't have anything left on Thor The Dark World. If I keep talking, I'm probably going to get myself in trouble. So we'll stop, and we'll see what you have to say. Hit that comment section. Let me know what you thought of Thor The Dark World. Let me know what you thought of my thoughts on Thor The Dark World. If you like this video, please hit a thumbs up. And as always, if you're a new subscriber here, just new to the channel in general, hit that subscribe button and then hit the little bell so you get alerts every time I make a new video, including the next installment of the Seaman's Infinity War Countdown. For the Seaman Cinema Sit Down, and for another edition of the Infinity War Countdown, I am the Seaman. I am signing off. Peace!